All right, so it's down to my section. I'm going to be finishing up Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, and I apologize to all of you for me not being able to be there, but I will be there to see you all next week. And again, I'm going to be finishing up Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 of the UTSA book. Now, towards the middle portion, towards the end portion of Chapter 3, it was discussing a meeting that they were having at one of the schools, at the Bandini school, that they called it Encuentro. Now, this meeting was students of color, and they were discussing the different problems that they were facing in the schools, one of which dealt with the conditions of the school itself, which some of it can be attributed to certain social stereotypes that go along with the type of area that the students lived in and the population of the school itself. Stereotypes that can create a feeling of the dominant racial groups, in which the students that went there had a lower academic ability and were treated as such, although that was not the case. As if you remember from reading the chapter, these students were expressing themselves in a very, very intelligent way. Now, the system separates them, and they're usually stereotyped as basic, but a lot of times these students are brilliant. A lot of these students are bilingual, and they have abilities that are usually untapped by the general society because of their ethnicity, and they're usually marginalized and relegated to relative obscurity. Now, there are educators out there that try to look at education from a cultural standpoint rather than an ethnic or racial standpoint. They try to institute things that the students can relate to. They try to remove those stereotypes and keep from marginalizing these students, whether it be of ethnic origin, gender, economic class or status, or even their sexual orientation. So we are starting to see strides in the education system. However, there's still a lot of work to be done. Now, one of the things that the students were mentioning was the fact that the school, it looked like pretty much a prison. So the young man by the name of Nick was talking about how it was not appealing to go to a place that had these really tall fences, gates, metal detectors, police everywhere. It generally made them feel as though they were walking into a prison, that they were prisoners rather than students. Now, in studies, it's been shown, one particular one that I'm quoting here is by Blum. Latinos and Native Americans and even some Asian Americans, they're not certain about how to discuss these issues of race and racism when the general society cubbyholes racism or racial issues as a black and white issue rather than an overall issue of race and discrimination or even prejudice. So a lot of times they may feel that that they're being dominated even more so than their African American students, because their views or their needs or their issues aren't really given the attention that they feel would give respect to that culture. Stereotypes cause groups to be pegged as having undesirable and stable qualities like low ability. And in the case of Bandini, as some other high schools, this goes on to issues of not allowing them to do AP courses or even stereotype, as one of the students mentioned. He was going to an activity to take photographs, and he was stopped by the campus security because they basically said he looked like a gangster. And they mentioned that no one's remembering that the school incidents where there was school shootings. Pretty much it was white kids that kind of lost their minds and went to school with weapons. I don't believe that it was something of them losing their minds, because in every single one of the cases it was something of premeditation. But they basically were, the news would put out that these kids needed counseling, that they were crazy. Now, when you turn around and look at African American kids and Chicanos, Chicanas, and any other like Hispanic group, instead of saying that they need counseling, they put more police into their school. And one issue that they brought up in that sense was, that they're not the kids that are, depicted in movies like Dangerous Minds or like The Substitute or even Freedom Riders. They basically feel that they're being stereotyped by the media to an extent that the media is creating a fictitious type of stereotype in which they are now being represented in a negative way, when in many cases it's not so. The news even put out a lot of bad things coming out of their high school, Bandini High School. Reina states that stereotypes represent a host of prepackaged expectations. Now, these expectations, they have certain consequences for the beliefs and behaviors of both the person being stereotyped and the person that is stereotyping. In many cases, both are at a loss. For instance, let's say an individual that stereotypes Chicanos as being inferior or perhaps not as intelligent walks into a building, and this person that's sitting behind the desk happens to be of Chicano origin and is the customer service rep or the person that they actually need to speak to. They may not feel like they're getting the information that they need without realizing that that person behind the desk is probably holding a PhD, probably has years and years of experience, and is quite possibly sitting there because they happen to be the most and best qualified person for the job. So rather than giving them the opportunity to help them, they're foregoing that assistance because of the stereotypes that they may have imposed. So, affirmative development. If we, and this is something that Yoso stated in her book, is what does it mean to affirm and develop the academic talents of Chicano, Chicano, and Black high school students with the intent of preparing them for college? Well, what I took away from that question was, what do we need to do in order to improve their chances at being prepared to go to college? She basically makes it seem as though community has a big place and responsibility in ensuring that these students are prepared both socially and educationally in order to eventually transform society as a whole. Now, I took this little clip from a Coolio song kind of as representative of what some of these students are feeling. Now, the reason that I speak to that, and I'm using a kind of a generalization, but it's kind of from my experience when I first came to the United States and started school. A lot of teachers, at least in my experience from when I went to school and from what I've seen in some other schools dealing with Hispanic students, the teachers don't want to understand those students' culture. So they end up not even trying to learn how these students learn. Now, until a system can understand the strife some of these students face day in and day out, they're never going to be able to teach them because they don't even really understand them at all. Now, going on to chapter 4, stages of passage, There's a pretty bleak reality that comes about. A lot of the Chicanas and Chicanos completed the least amount of bachelor's degrees. So 26 out of every 100 elementary school students even make it to college, and most of them, they start in a community college. Part of that is because they lack the proper counseling and preparation. And although 70% aspire to attend a four-year college, less than 10% reach that goal. Now, lack of preparation in secondary education means that they may require remedial work. And a lot of times they don't even realize that this remedial work does not count towards credit. A lot of college administrators urge them to obtain two-year vocational degrees because they feel that their cultural deficits may make them less prepared to complete a four-year degree. Many institutions simply just blame the culture for the lack of the success. But there are numerous factors that combine to produce achievement discrepancies, like language barriers, low socioeconomic status, and one of the big factors that can't be overlooked is that there's expectations and beliefs about groups and minority students, so that in some classrooms they're basically treated as less intelligent or less able to complete the work. Now, a lot of the K through 12 systems are chronically under-preparing the students. Only 21% of Latinas or Latinos who graduate high school in California have even completed minimum entrance requirements. And so nationally, the highest increase in Chicano college enrollments in community college, and few transferred to four-year college or university. And one of the things that could be to blame is the cool-out factor, which, like I stated earlier, some of the administration of these colleges convince these students that going to four-year college is going to be too difficult for them. So rather than assisting them and preparing them, they kind of cool their plans down into cubbyholing them into kind of a two-year degree or anything that they can obtain within that community college. Now, in 1968, affirmative action sought to alleviate some of the racial discrimination in college enrollment, and it was making some pretty good strides. Now, in California, for instance, though, in 1978, back v. UC Regents ended goals and timetables, so race was now only one factor. Then Proposition 209 ended the restricted use of affirmative action, so colleges could not use race, even to diversify its campuses. Now later, Grutter v. Bollinger, it allowed the original use of affirmative action to be reinstated. Now, as recently as a couple of weeks ago in this country, we're seeing that this happening all over again. Wisconsin and I believe also Michigan finally had some cases that were won by the complainant dealing with affirmative action in order to enable some students of color to go into certain universities that up to this point were still not allowing it. Now, in many cases, the system doesn't truly understand or appreciate the ethnic experience. They simply analyze it into a neat category. So a lot of time, and in one case, they were talking about how to emphasize assimilation, that all, Hispanics or foreigners assimilate and leave their family behind. They get a new language, new clothes, attitude, whatever, all the things that come along with assimilating. But as the student mentioned, it seems too neat and clean because they don't take into account all the struggles that it takes for some of these students to get through college. They also have instances within the Hispanic community where we do have students that are much lighter skin that can actually pass for white. And, in Mexico they call them güeritas or güeritos. And in this particular case, there was one student where, she wished she had darker skin. Most people assumed she was white. She liked receiving the positive attention, but, she noticed that her brother received a lot of negative attention. Now, people of color can be racially prejudiced against each other, but racism is a system of prejudice plus power. Now, this is going to end my 15 minutes of the initial portion, and I will do a part 2 which my partners should be able to hit play here in the future.